Welcome to episode 79 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And today we're delighted to have Larry Kotch, who is the CEO of an organisation called Flybox. So welcome, Larry.
Hi, Alistair. Hi, Jane. Nice to be with
Hi,
you.
Larry.
So could you maybe walk us through your journey from, I noticed in your LinkedIn profile, you were previously built a tech agency and now you're CEO of an organisation called Flybox, and how that came about?
Yeah. So I actually started in university studying waste management as a kind of topic for my dissertation and thesis, and that took me to. I grew up in South Africa, and I was looking at the waste management sector there, and I came across the first ever insect farming company, really, and met the founder, as it was a very small thing at the time, very new, and ended up writing a lot of my dissertation on that and getting bitten by the bug, so to speak.
So what was, come on
Literally
then.
or figuratively?
Not bitten by any. Luckily, there was no mean bugs in his farm.
What was your degree and what was your dissertation in?
It was in environmental governance, and it was on waste management, the policies of the waste management sector in South Africa.
Right.
But in the end, ended up being about innovation more than anything, focusing on this new insect farming thing that I'd seen, and got really excited about it. Actually tried to train as an entomologist, but was told by the entomologist that I met at Harper Adams to not do that. He said the world has the world has enough entomologists. You seem like you want to get going with things. Go and learn the world of business, and there'll always be entomologists looking for partners later. Very good advice. Probably wasn't suited to my temperament, and ended up inadvertently following his advice. Went into the world of work, mainly corporate finance first, and then eventually launched out to do a software development agency when it was still cool to do that, in like 2014, 2015, when that everyone thought that would be a good idea. Grew it to like 40 people in 2 different countries, and then picked up the insect farming side of things with the kind of money I'd made from that. Came back to my passion when one of my good friends who was also in the insect industry, decided she was leaving her job and wanted to do something. And that's kind of when I decided to take the plunge and get back into the space. Yeah.
So,
Brilliant.
can I ask, when you say insects, what do you mean by insects?
It's the larvae of the black soldier fly are the insects we use.
Okay.
So it's like you can imagine maggots.
Oh.
Yeah.
So is it the actual maggot or the fly that does the work?
It's the maggot. The flies don't have mouth parts. Most flies, it's only decomposing ones, like rather than the ones that sort of bite and need to insert their larvae into things, or parasitic flies and things like that. But as far as the ones that eat refuse or decomposing material in nature, let's say nature's cleanup crew fly, their larvae do all the eating. So the flies actually, like even the ones that buzz around you in the, in a field or a picnic, they're not interested in eating your food. What they want is to lay their eggs near a source of food for their neonates.
Because they're young.
And so, yeah.
So how does it work then? So you've got these flies and these maggots, and what's the outcome? How do you do it?
So what we call it insect waste management. Other people call it insect farming. We've moved away from that wording. We think it was a mistake to go down the insect farming route. And we think it's far more aligned as a waste management solution for the existing waste management industry. And so what we're trying to do is to take this natural fact that insect larvae can eat organic waste and upcycle it into protein, into the larvae, and create a very rich fertilizer, a residue at the end. What we want to do is, since that is currently the only circular way of dealing with organics right now, everything else we do with organic waste is essentially burning it. Well, other than composting, which is, as far as food waste goes, is not a very profitable thing to do. Garden waste, fair enough. But for the sort of pre-consumer, and in other countries you can use post-consumer, a mixed food waste. We're currently it's either ending up in a black bin bag and incinerated, or it's either separated and in biogas. And this is all trying to recover energy from the waste. So still, it's a linear system where food is coming in one end and then it's being burned at the other end. Whereas insect waste management takes waste and it feeds it to an animal that then goes back into the food system that creates the waste that goes back into, it's the circle. And so there are various impediments or inefficiencies doing it in certain countries like the UK and the EU, because we currently subsidize the alternatives like AD. We subsidize them to the tune of £1 billion a year as a citizens. And so in that context, it's more difficult to get it to stack up economically for some players. But a lot of things are changing on that front. And we can get into that if you like. But ultimately, this fly is eating organic waste and it's turning it into protein and fertilizer, their larvae. And those are then sold as products, as ingredients for other markets.
So, sorry, I'm going to be a bit
I've got loads of questions as well, Jane, but I'll let you go.
Like, so you're taking in you could take in food waste, from household food waste, for example, and you putting it into something. How many flies or larvae does it take to, chew up all that food? What's the sort of ratio between food and larva?
Yeah, so Flybox operates globally. So we actually have 6 sites already. So in certain of the countries we're in, you can use black bin food waste. So food waste that's post-consumer. You cannot do that in the UK or in the EU. That's illegal. So and when we talk about food waste in the UK and the EU, to clarify, I'm talking about byproduct. Reject organics.
Is that because
I can't actually use the word waste
because of the animal byproducts?
Correct.
Regulations.
Yeah. It's the Category 3 ABP complication.
I thought you could do that, Larry. I was involved way back about a fish farm that was looking at using Category 3 waste, and I think it was a wormery they were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, you can't currently do that in the UK, at least the protein part. The fertilizer is a kind of grey area. If you're going to neutralize the larvae and mash them back into the fertilizer, it's a grey area.
Okay.
Recent legislation indicates that they don't like that either. But it's because they're in the farmed animal category, and this is the exact reason why we don't like the moniker of insect farming, because it set the industry up for this problem. Whereas if you look at animals that we farm, they're of a certain scale, and then we have bacteria in biogas doing methanogenesis, and insects are somewhere to the left of that scale. They're sort of closer towards. They're a decomposing animal. I mean, yes, they're not a bacteria; they're a multicellular organism, but they're much more. They're in the same role as those bacteria in the ecosystem. They're not it's weird to compare it to a sheep or to a pig or to a chicken, but because it's insect farming, it got bucketed into that list, and then all of the issues that face other animals now face insects. So you can't feed them a waste source, you can't feed them ABP because of all of the concerns around BSE, and which are all very well founded concerns, but they do limit what we can do, and it actually goes against what the science shows is safe to do, as confirmed by many European studies. Every study confirms that this isn't a disease risk, and there's many other countries building hundreds of sites and have been doing so for a decade without incident. But there's a very big precautionary principle, as we all know, and very difficult to innovate within Europe in general. So that's we're no different from that. Yeah,
I always thought when I'd looked at this previously that it was the flies you were actually farming. It's not the farm. So I'm assuming your process doesn't allow them to get to flies. You're trying to capture them when they're still at larvae. So in terms of that, I just imagine. I remember I used to work at a landfill site a long, long time ago, and there was a pump chamber I used to go into, and every time you went into that pump chamber, the walls were just black with blue bottles.
Yes.
And it was just horrific. It was just they never actually touched you, but just the thought of going into that cupboard was just
So we look at that as good protein. Or you just need to put a chicken down there, and they'll fish them out for you.
Yeah. And then the use for the protein. Sorry, the use for the protein. Where is that valuable then as a food? Is that food for animals, or does it go into the human food chain?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so under novel foods, things like crickets and mealworms, you can put into human food as long as you label that it's in there. Yeah. And one of my favorite protein bars is called Hop. I'm going to advertise for them now, but they're delicious. It's just like, chocolate flavor, strawberry flavor, but they've got cricket inside them. And it's actually way better amino acids than whey, because it's a whole animal. It's got all these micronutrients as well. It's actually better performance in the gym and tastes exactly the same. If you didn't know there was cricket in there, you would have no way of telling. And you can actually produce them very competitively. That is happening. There is people innovating with that. They tried the whole sort of insect snacks. Consumers don't want it. I don't blame them. I don't necessarily, even working in the industry, I don't want to eat insects for definitely other than a curio. I wouldn't want to do that, but it's
I'm a
mainly an animal feed.
celebrity thing, isn't it? I'm a celeb.
Exactly.
Get me home. Go and eat your bugs.
Yeah, I don't want to knock that, because there are people that do like it, and there are taste profiles that are very interesting. Like some insects have a lot of nutty taste profiles that you can't get anywhere else, and so they might have their applications. I'm not currently thinking it's going to be a big thing. It's mainly pet food. If you look at like pet food, fish food, and then let's say swine, poultry, and all the others. That's the order at which people will pay the most for ingredients. So pet food, premium. We're happy to feed our pets, raw salmon and things like that. So they get the best grub, and then fish meal, because depending on the fish, they need a lot of protein, and they need animal protein often, especially carnivorous fish that we farm inland. That's a huge market. 5 million tons a year goes into that kind of feed, and fish meal is much higher priced than soya meal, which is the usual protein component of poultry, swine meal. Is soya, which is dirt cheap, is the largest cause of deforestation on earth, shipped over from Brazil. So the whole industry is asking for an alternative protein, a protein that is coming from making any virgin resources, not requiring any more land to be cut down, nothing. So we're trying to get from waste this protein that we need to feed our animals. The question is then the price. And right now, insects only have their niche in the pet and the premium aqua markets, because the price is too high to produce it. And the price is too high to produce it because the input costs for running an insect farm, depending on who you are, for a lot of operators is challenging, because in Europe, I'm talking about, everywhere else it's going gangbusters, but in Europe, you're subsidizing the alternatives. You're subsidizing the feedstock for the alternatives. As soon as you remove that subsidy, which is happening, the simpler recycling scheme, which we all know coming into effect, is doing massive changes to organic feedstock pricing. The business model starts becoming, then it's an even playing field. Then insects really start edging out the business model, and then you can get insects pricing down to more of that mass fish market. I think that's the realistic goal for the industry, is to hit the mass fish meal market and the mass pet food market. That's the as in like the sort of mid ingredient pricing for those. So like insect protein coming in at like 1,500 to 2,000 pounds a ton, then you've got a massive market for it. Whereas right now it's commanding like a 3,000 pounds a ton, 2,500. And so that's, that pricing is continuously going down as technology improves and as the waste management costs are being kicked back to the producers rather than us subsidizing them. But yeah.
And do you need to process the larvae to turn it into that food? Is there a process after you've done your breakdown of the food?
Yeah, it depends on the product that people are looking for. Dried larvae, defatted larvae, so you're separating the oils and the protein and then selling those as ingredients. And then there's the fertilizer, which is called frass. Those are the main ingredients. But live larvae is also a really good product. And in terms of new operators, though, a lot of people just want, the way Flybox looks at it is we want to give people a waste management tool. So we take care of the breeding part. So what you mentioned earlier, the flies making more babies, basically, to go and eat the waste. We take care of that part so that you just subscribe to the inputs. It's like the bacteria or whatever you're adding into the AD. You have someone that you subscribe to that for, the juveniles.
Yep.
And on the back end, you can have an offtake agreement to offtake the protein as live, so that then people don't need to invest in complicated processing, selling ingredients, working out how to do all the entomology. What we want it to be is waste goes into this process over here. It ends up in a porridge. It goes into trays. The juveniles are put into the trays. They grow, they get sieved, and they get sold. That's what we want it to be as simple as. And that's where we're different, is a lot of the other companies in the space are trying to sell solutions that require the operator to do everything, to do defatting, entomology, and it's just a lot of risk and a lot of expense. So that's kind of why we set up Flybox, is to try and make it much less complex, much less expensive from day one to do. Yeah.
So do you is it like a lease thing? So you've got your modular units and you'll kind of lease them and do all the difficult bits?
We do have like a lease option, but right now it's a straight sales model at the moment. So we just, people buy infrastructure off them if they have financing for that.
Who's your ideal? Sorry, we've strayed totally off the question set. As I suspected, we may. Who's your ideal buyer? Is it a farmer? Is it the farming community, or is it the waste management community? Who's chapping your door? Who's interested?
So all of the inquiries come inbound for us because there's a lot of people aware of this space. And I'd say every major waste manager, every waste manager knows it's happening. All of the big names that you know of own already their own insect farms. A lot of them in South Asia and in North America. All the big people that you would know off the top of your head are all in this space in one way or another, whether they're building a pilot or buying a company. So waste management is our sort of top industry because they control the feedstock. They need to build more infrastructure. This is another option that's aligned to what the government is trying to get the industry to do and what customers want, like circular solutions. So that's that one side. Then there's actual people that are generating the waste. So waste producers, this would be food manufacturing mainly, or food retail, food distribution that have, let's say, fruit and veg waste, several tons of fruit and veg a day. That's very difficult to find a home for, especially now with the simpler recycling scheme. Good luck trying to get those into AD in a year's time when they've got their fill from the council mixed food waste. So a lot of what we're seeing is a lot of that stuff is being now rejected out of AD as all of this new black bin food waste segregated is now coming online. It's not like we're building capacity, even with the best will in the world. It's not like anyone's building £1 billion of AD infrastructure right now. So where are we going to soak up that capacity? And so that's the other one, is people coming to us who are generators of waste who say we want a solution that we want to manage our own waste on site. And that's where those containers, our Flybox, then becomes a kind of system to do that. It's kind of like on-farm biogas, or like on-site IWM, we call it insect waste management. So that's kind of our second bucket. And then, agri is definitely another one. In many parts of the world, you can use manure. Manure is one of the best feedstocks for insects. There's no way I don't know. I reckon it'll be 10 years before anyone will allow you to do that in the UK, just given how glacial the pace of change is with these things. So, but in many parts of the world, people are cracking on with manure-based solutions. So farmers are very interested. But I'd say UK, EU, it's mainly those first two.
I was going to ask, do you see is the growth in the developing world where some of this is maybe a bit easier to do? There's less regulation, there's more of probably an issue with how the waste be managed at the moment. If that grows significantly, then potentially the opportunities in Europe and the UK would be much more noticeable. Is that where you think it might go?
Yeah, I think also some of the places in like the tropics and subtropics, like, East Africa is a great hotspot. Parts of Northwest Africa are great hotspots. Parts of Asia, parts of South America, where the climate is already basically the nice climate for the insect. Here we have to put them in a farm, essentially, climate controlled environment. You can reduce the operating costs, there's lower labor costs, but then it's trickier with feedstock there, reliability, trying to get that stuff exported. I think that in the short term, there's a lot of scope in the global south to push some serious volumes, but people are doing it very rudimentary right now. That everyone's trying to have a crack, basically, just in polytunnels, pits in the ground. You can get some really cheap solutions that I've been to loads of them in Kenya and Uganda and Nigeria, and like there's definitely lots happening there, but the operational side isn't there yet, and there is a layer of tech that they need. The successful ones in Kenya have a layer of tech that the others still haven't wised up that they need. And so to get some serious, but the scale will come. And in Europe, it will depend on all these landfill bans, the changing dynamics of organic waste, how the governments choose to subsidize waste to energy or not, and regulations, and and also the genetic improvements in the insect, which are ongoing. So like poultry, they're becoming faster at eating the waste because there's all sorts of selective breeding programs going on. So there's a lot. So when you add all those things together, you can get to very competitive prices produced in Europe, where you can get to fish meal pricing. But how quickly all of that stuff will happen depends. Might happen quicker in different areas to others. So there'll be these local opportunities in Europe, which will be very interesting for certain players to pursue. But to get real mass market appeal, you need that regulatory change, and you need the regulatory change.
So how much waste can you treat? What's the sort of volumes that you're looking at?
Like any other site, I mean, you can go from 0 to 200 tons a day. Depends how big you want to make the factory.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of flies and larvae, I would think.
Yeah, you're making me.
Yeah. But they never make it to fly, like you say. They're all harvested well before they make it to adult life. So only about a small percent are kept to actually mature into adults. They're in their own breeding program. So you have breeding larvae that are allowed to fully mature. They're fed a special diet and they just, generate a lot of eggs. But the production larvae, the ones that are sent to go eat waste, their fate is sealed. Like they're going into into animal feed.
They're going to eat themselves to death, basically.
Well, animals will eat them. Yeah, yeah, they'll eat exactly. They'll eat themselves to death eventually. Yeah, exactly.
So how do you get over that? I can just imagine a food manufacturer. The last thing they want is a container with thousands of flies in their site, isn't it? How do you get over that?
Well, there's no flies in the site, but there's larvae. Yeah,
I know, but
yeah,
the perception is
there's flies in the site. So how do you get over? How do you do that convincing?
I mean, I think people are fairly desperate for a circular organic waste solution, or a circular as in like someone like, I want to use a case study, or I don't want to name drop, but a big fruit and veg distributor is back to digging holes in the ground, and they're very scared about the fact that they're doing that, because you're not supposed to do that, because the AD won't take their material anymore because they've got access to the bin waste from the council. So they're being charged silly numbers to take it away, which are ruinous numbers. And so they don't really have an option. And while there's the sort of negative perception of larvae, there's the positive perception that they are one of the few people that are fully circular on their waste. So as soon as their fruit and veg goes into AD, it's a waste. As soon as it goes to insect, it becomes a byproduct. So they've technically become a zero waste business. So what was a business generating 1,000 tons of waste a year that was being properly recycled, they become a business with zero waste a year on their reporting. So if you can imagine, for like companies that care about that sort of thing, that are maybe even publicly traded, it's a very big perception thing to say we're actually reducing our waste to zero. Because right now, because what they're shifting it to is a product. Their waste becomes a feed ingredient. It's no longer a waste. So that's a big thing that people often miss, is that as soon as you send it to insects or other animals, it's a feed. It's no longer a waste. And so your reporting changes.
And in terms of licensing and regulations, you can probably do that on the factory because you're dealing with the waste where it's produced.
Yeah. And they obviously, the aim is for them to make money with this as well. So it turns waste from a cost into a local opportunity where they actually make, they make money every month. So that's usually the draw for them. And then once they understand that there's no flies on site, it's mainly the larvae, and that they're sieving them and storing them for sale. That's believe it or not, they're quite cute, actually, the larvae. You can find it.
Jane's not looking convinced. She's not looking convinced at the moment.
I'm quite fascinated, actually. So is there a lot of tech involved? I mean, I'm presuming you don't just shove a load of maggots in with the apple cores and stuff like that, and all of a sudden they do something. Presumably you've got to be right temperature and make sure that they're not turning into flies and things like that. So is there a lot of technology and in the bit of kit that you've got to do that?
Yeah, you're right. So each insect waste system has 4 main parts to it. One is the waste or byproduct, or processing side.
Let's go for resource.
Yeah, byproduct, exactly. Resource processing. And so the material comes in, whether it's wet or dry, it gets crushed and turned into a porridge and mixed into a porridge. That porridge is then dosed out into trays. So like you can imagine trays sort of this thick, could take like 10, 20 kilos inside each tray. And then on top of that is dosed the appropriate amount of neonates. So we take care of that, the pre-dosing, so that on the client side, they just dose one dose to a tray.
Okay.
And so the juveniles go in there. They're then stacked. In our systems, they're stacked by a robot arm, stacks them on a pallet. And then that has to go into a controlled environment, which keeps it at a tropical 30 degrees. Now, it's not actually that energy intensive to do, because the insects are metabolizing so much that they give off tons of heat, and tons of humidity comes out of the waste. So what you're actually doing is, most of the year you're just running different fans and you're recirculating the air and dealing with the odors, and that's mainly what you're doing. And then in winter and in summer you may have the heat pump start getting involved. So if you do design the system right, then you can, for a low cost, maintain a tropical environment. They're in there for about 8 days and the waste is gone. So whatever waste you put in there is just, it's a bone dry fertilizer.
Wow.
And the larvae wriggling around in it. And so they've grown 5,000 times in mass in 8 days. So they've just, you can put 10 tons in and you'll have it completely done 8 days later.
So I take it that's the skill of the dosing, that you need to make sure you're not adding too many and not too little.
Exactly
otherwise,
right. That's exactly right. Otherwise, you have not large enough larvae. I mean, you can have not large. It's always better to have more larvae that have finished eating than to have larvae that have finished eating, because once they finish eating, you will not get them to eat anymore. They become pre-pupae, where they just, all they want to do is get out of there and find a quiet area to become a fly, and so their biology says, I want to out. I don't want to eat anymore. And so if you've underdosed your larvae, then it's very difficult to separate them from the wet material. So you want to optimize it. So right at the end of the 8 days, the program finishes, everything's nice and dry. The frass is more or less quite fine because they've had time to just chew through all of it. And then you put it, you basically destack the trays into a sieve, and out one chute comes the larvae, and out the other chute comes the frass. And then the larvae can just be stored either in a chiller if they're being sold live, or frozen, live frozen. So the main product is just live frozen, and then they're sold in tons to pet food manufacturers and things. Yeah.
So are they frozen just so that they don't go into flies? You don't kill them then?
You can, yes. There's a blanching step you can do as well. Especially if you're going to, there's a blanching step you can do before freezing. You can also put them into a dryer straight away, so they come straight off the sieve, straight into a dryer. It will take about 3 weeks for them to turn into a fly from the point at which you harvest them.
Myself and Jane were talking about this the other day, the life cycle of a fly. I always thought it was 10 days or something going from a larvae to a fly.
No, it's a lot longer.
It's longer than that. Is it longer than
that? From a pre-pupa to pupa, and then to the fly actually emerging. It depends on the species. There's many different species that have different life cycles, but black soldier fly is from the sort of the 5th instar where you harvest them when they're the fattest and most nutritious, and they still have to go through the final instar, the pre-pupa, the pupa. That's a good 2 to 3 weeks depending on where they're stored before they'll become a fly. And they're only alive as a fly for very little time, like a week, where all their job to do is just find a mate and lay eggs. So
get into people's houses and buzz around, and then you can't get out.
And then are you?
Yeah. So I'm going to share a little anecdote with you, Larry, because every time we mention food waste recycling to people and doing their food waste, they basically say, no, I've done it and there's maggots. There's maggots in my food waste. And I'm like, I've never had maggots in my food waste. I've never, and I've been doing it for years. So I'm just wondering, how do they get maggots and I don't? What are they doing? Is it just because it's heating up or being kept too long, or... have they
depends if flies are laying eggs. Yeah, flies would have had to lay eggs inside where they're storing waste. So it might be that they're not sealed properly where they're keeping their food waste. So flies have got in and laid eggs. Depends how often they're disposing. Yeah.
Is there not a time element for that in terms of lay egg? It doesn't immediately hatch, does it?
Yeah, so it depends how long they're keeping their food waste storing it in one place. The longer you keep it, the more open it is to pests, the more maggots you're going to find in there. Yeah. So
I think they're making up stories to you, Jane.
I do as well.
I don't think that.
I think they just don't want to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, you've obviously, did you mention, have you got a site up and running in the UK?
Yeah, we've got 4 in the UK actually.
You've got 4 in the UK?
Yeah, but our site that we actually own and operate is in Chesham, Buckinghamshire. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a kind of R&D demonstrator. So we bring people along, we do tours there, but we also operate it.
So how big are these units? Because I'm thinking, I'm presuming as big as you want, but I'm thinking by the time you've put in the food waste, that's all gone to porridge. Then you've got all of these, then you're chucking it into some trays, adding the things, and then they've got to go somewhere else. How big is the unit?
So the boxes, it's on our website, you can see the detail of each system, but usually it's someone has to have some warehouse space to put the processing equipment in. So it depends on what the site looks like. But the actual fly boxes are just the controlled environment. So that's just to grow the actual larvae. We can containerize the entire thing, so including the waste container and the sieving container, and freezers and offices. We can create an entire container-based site. We actually did a quote for someone, didn't go through in the end, but it was a full container system, and we actually started off like that as well. But realistically, most people that are into this, whether it's a waste manager or a food business of some sort, would need to have some sort of building nearby or set aside to house at least the processing equipment, and then the actual fly boxes are the containers. But if they're going in a warehouse, we also have non-containerized versions, so our technology can be built in growing tunnels, whether they're containers or not. Yeah.
I had probably a really unfair question for you.
No, that's okay.
Any disasters along the way? You've obviously needed to trial this and perfect it over time. Any memorable disasters where things didn't work?
I mean, I wouldn't say like disasters, but when you see a container where all of the larvae have escaped, for whatever reason, sometimes it happens if, let's say, there's a power cut. I remember like a project we were working on, there was a power cut, and so none of the fans were on. We've changed that now with backups, but and so they just get really agitated as soon as that happened, because the CO2 ammonia built up. So you open the doors and you have larvae on every single inch of the container, everywhere. Probably shouldn't be saying that, but yeah, we went through that so others don't have to. So all you have to do there is it's just a cleanup job. Like, they don't get anywhere, but it's just a.
They're not going to run off at a fast
pace. It's like a nightmare. If you've never seen insect farming before, and that was your first experience of it, you'd think it was a bit of a nightmare. I've seen that twice in my life over the last 4 years, but yeah.
So you've talked about the value in terms of the getting the protein, getting the fertiliser. What about job creation opportunities? Does it take many people to run one, or is it relatively low labour numbers to do it?
I mean, in the global south, it's very labour intensive. That's the model they go through there. So it's a really good impact story in places like Kenya, and there's a lot of development aid funders that are interested in it for that reason. But in the UK, labour's really not the job creation is not the problem. I mean, here we have a workforce that doesn't want to work in waste management already, and doesn't want to work in these kind of jobs. So every person we try to sell stuff to tells us, how automated can you make it? How much can you make this so that there's no humans needed? Because I'm not sure whether there's going to be any workforce to work this in 10 years time. So here, definitely the name of the game is, how automated can you go? So yes, the job creation, there can be specialized jobs in insect nutrition, just like the chemists that look at AD sites. That kind of job skill, like technical engineers, production engineers, site managers, supervisors, all of those kind of roles are definitely up for grabs. Entomologists, of course, too.
That's what I was going to say. What's your essential skills you need right at the top end?
Basic labor and site and site supervision by a sort of vaguely technical engineer or production manager type person, and then everything else is labor running on operational guidelines, because it is just the stuff we sell in the UK is as automated as you can make it. So it really is, feedstock goes in here, and then there's a shuttle of the larvae in their trays, to and from the controlled environments. But then there's a robotic arm that deals with the stacking, destacking, sieving, drying. It just kind of all goes on conveyors in a kind of big loop. Kind of looks like a modern food factory, except for it's just making insects.
Flies.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the reverse of your question earlier on was asking, how big can you make them? How small scale can you make them? Sometimes you get sites with, relatively small quantities of food waste, but it's quite problematic to them just because it is, a ton or a couple of tons a week or whatever it might be.
That's right.
Is there a minimum scale you can go down to?
1 ton, half a ton a day of food waste. But of course, it depends on how big of a. So when I say half a ton a day, that would be the capacity of our smallest unit, is half a ton of food waste a day. I mean, it's done in batches, in 3 or 4 batches a month, but that's the sort of scale. But depending on how much of an economic problem it is to deal with the waste, running it half full, a quarter full could be, because, operation is a quarter less. Energy price stays the same, or might even go up depending on how utilized the box is. But labor goes down in line, feedstock, costs or handling or storage goes down in line, and the amount of juvenile larvae you need on subscription goes down in line. So many of the input costs just scale down with you. So you could run it at half capacity and just take a slightly extra inefficiency in the box. But if your alternative is paying, out the nose for a waste disposal, cost, then the economics might work for you. So the economics are always case by case, and we go through, usually with prospects, we go through a nutrition and waste mapping or feedstock mapping to see what they've got access to that could be used.
Yeah.
And then we do trials at our site in Chesham to see what is the biological performance on your feedstock, and therefore what money will you be able to generate from the larvae that come off this. So then we have the buyback conversation with them. So based on those nutritional trials, we then say, okay, well, the site could run with these numbers and try and give every guarantee we can behind them.
So what's the time scales from, well, I've got two questions actually. What's the time scales from putting the food waste in to getting the protein out? That's my first question. And I can't remember what my second question is. Go with the
That's
first question.
8
days.
to 10 days depends again on the feedstock.
Right, okay.
And the end product you're happy with. So if the most simple process where you've got, a okay enough feedstock that delivers the basic nutrition of the insects, and you're just selling the live larvae or frozen, that's all that's happening, then 8 days is what you try and target. Yeah.
So in terms of feedstock, so is there what's the difference in the feedstock? What makes the difference? Is it moisture content? Is it the size of it? Is it how it gets mushed up, or what's the sort of difference?
So you want to end up, after you've done all your processing, with something that's 70% moisture content. That's really the ideal. I mean, it has to be 70, like not 65, not 75. There's big difference. Like, it can derail the process. 70 is what they like. And so if you've got something that's wetter, let's say you have fruit and veg and you're at 80 or 85, you'd need a drying agent, a kind of bulking agent, or another, grain dust from a local partner, or, spent grains to balance that out. So that's what the usual first step is people usually say, I've got this waste problem, can I use it for insects? And it's usually answering that question first. It's like, can it be done? How would you do it? And what would the economics of that look like? That's usually the first question. So really does depend, but you do want to end up with something that's got the best chances of growing the fattest larvae for as cheap as possible. It's like in it's called least cost formulation of feedstock, and it's the same approach they use for chicken nutrition and swine nutrition. It's like looking at the available ingredients you have and looking at what's the least cost formulation to deliver the protein, carbs, and fat. But because it's a waste management play, you might say, my preference is that 100% of this waste goes, and that's what I want to happen. And so then you're looking, as a nutritionist, you're looking at, is that 100% going to be enough for the insects, or are they going to be lacking something critical? Is there enough protein? Is there enough energy? Is there enough fiber? And then you go and help them identify the missing ingredient, as part of a waste mapping ingredient.
So you need to have the right stuff, otherwise you won't get the right fat.
It's a trade-off, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So sometimes you might just accept a lower bioconversion, like instead of a 22% bioconversion into insect larvae, you might accept 10% because you've got such a big problem with the waste feedstock that you're being charged £100 a ton to get rid of. Well, actually, the economics make a lot of sense even at 10%. But for someone else who's got a great feedstock that's being paid to, people are paying like bread, let's say they've got bakery waste or something, they're being paid by someone to take it, then the economics might not make sense, despite it being brilliant for insects. Then the numbers might not add up. It sounds maybe more. I guess it's no more complicated than biogas and making sure you've got the right ingredients going in there.
Composting and anaerobic digestion. It's to say, you need to have you basically your right bugs, your right ratios, to make the right thing at the end. No, I think a lot of it again is perception, isn't it? It's the fact that you think about everybody thinks flies, bugs, but actually, if you think it more of a process in terms of this is what happens, it actually, it's just a process, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's nature's answer to they're nature's recycling crew. They eat dead animals and manures in nature, and this is how nature keeps zero waste. Is from critters like this. So
that sounds fascinating. So what's next for Flybox apart from taking over the world by the sound of it, Larry? Anything exciting?
I guess I have to worry about if I say taking over the world and I have an army of insects behind me, people get worried. So I have to
Bugs life.
Especially robots and insects. Well, it's even worse because then automated robots and insects.
Just throw in some AI to that, and you've really got you've got a horror movie.
Exactly. So
big plans then.
We've got several projects that we're very excited about that hopefully we'll announce quite soon, that we're in the design phase, and hopefully, we'll move forward to construction in the next, by the end, certainly this year, that we'll announce. And so that will keep us busy. And we're about to complete a fundraising round as well, which will help us to scale what we're doing at Chesham, build it out even more, and develop the next gen of our tech, which is what we're calling our Generation 3, which is a platform that can handle much bigger sites. So, 30, 40, 50 ton a day sites, which is the next step we want to take if we want to start, moving the needle with this. And so, lots to be getting on with, but just hoping it can have an impact and hoping we can put insects to work in the economy,
I always remember back to, I went to a presentation, it was talking about food waste. And at the moment, the waste sector looks at food waste quite sort of superficially, it's compost or AD, that's the only options. And whoever was presenting was saying, that, do you realise in that waste food, there's probably 30 or 40% protein?
Yeah.
And the value protein is way, off the scale, so if you can work out some way of getting that protein out and reusing it and recapturing it, it's actually really valuable. And it was a real eye opener for him just to go through and, that, he was obviously coming from the sort of fish food or animal food manufacturing base, if you like.
Gotcha.
And it was just, and you appeared to be in a similar space where you're making that protein, which has got, high values, if you can do it right.
Yeah, I think when I got really excited about this space was at uni, actually looking at what's come out now anyways. Back when I was looking at it, there wasn't a lot of the research that's been done recently, but on the sort of thermodynamics of insect waste management versus AD, and that's the kind of white paper I think you mentioned, Jane, is very much trying to assess all these different technologies and trying to reduce them to one number, because, how does energy flow through a system from the calories in food waste that are still there, like you said, the calories that are there, turning that into energy, there's certain losses in transmission. You've got to get the food waste from A to B, then you've got to have bacteria eat it, basically. There's a conversion loss there from the calories into the methane, and the methane has to be burnt. There's a conversion loss there. It's got to spin a turbine, conversion loss, transmission to someone's house, conversion loss. So how many steps are there where you're losing energy to the conversion each time you convert it? And insects, theoretically, in theory, have less conversion loss points, but it depends on how much we value the electricity price versus, protein pricing, calorie pricing. So it's always like a balance of these different assumptions that you're making, but ultimately we should be able to speak about these technologies in terms of, energy to energy, what's the flow. And when I started getting really excited about insects is when you start seeing that the actual energy economics look better, absent subsidies, absent regulations, absent scaling issues, absent technological maturity. AD's got a big, we also don't see ourselves competing against AD. It's a very valuable technology and they're very complementary with each other. But to give an analog, AD has had a lot longer, a lot more investment, and a lot of government incentives to put waste in there. And so it's, even if you have the energy economics working in favor of insects or some other method, the government has staggered an industry to basically box out the scaled adoption of new technologies. That's what happens typically. I mean, not to sound political, but it's one consequence of the government meddling in price action would be that then after that, what happens? And so, how is that how can you naturally have new things come up? How can you keep that creative destruction going in the economy, or how we deal with food waste, if you're picking a winner, if you see what I mean? So, and I understand why they did it, in order to incentivize food waste, which we don't want, creating emissions. But I think there needs to be that recognizing that we want to keep favoring banning food to landfill, but being kind of more open about different solutions coming online and not hamstringing them right from day one. So I think that's
good luck with that one.
Good
luck with that one.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
No, but there's great people in the government, and especially like people like IUK, for instance, like great vision of people over there. There's a lot of really well motivated people that are looking at making these changes. It's just there's a lot of red tape and BSE and all that stuff that needs to be carefully navigated, but the will is there. It's just a question of time. That
Good.
is my honest opinion. Yeah.
Good.
Well, that was fascinating, Larry. I think we've not stuck to any of the questions we sent you, I don't think, but I think we've covered most of the things that were in the question set. So, no, I think that's fascinating. Certainly, I learnt a lot in terms of technology. It's one of these ones that's always just been, I've heard about it, but never really understood it, if you like, or chatted it through with somebody. So, thank you very much
justice.
Thank you very much for doing that. Much appreciated.
No worries. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.